There are moments in your life when your reaction surprises even you. A small comment ruins your mood for hours. A delayed reply makes your heart race. A simple compliment lights you up for an entire day. You tell yourself you're rational.com, self-aware, and yet something invisible pulls the strings. The truth is, you are constantly being influenced by emotional triggers you didn't consciously choose. They operate quietly beneath your awareness, shaping your decisions, your relationships, your confidence, and even your identity. Today, we're diving deep into 7 emotional triggers you probably didn't realize you have. But once you see them, you'll start noticing them everywhere. The first emotional trigger hiding in plain sight is the fear of being ignored. Most people think they fear rejection, but being ignored cuts deeper in a different way. Rejection at least acknowledges your existence. Ignoring erases it. When someone doesn't respond to your message, doesn't acknowledge your effort, doesn't react to your presence, something primitive activates inside you. Your brain interprets silence as social danger. Thousands of years ago, being excluded from the group meant vulnerability and even death. That ancient wiring hasn't disappeared. Today, it shows up as overthinking. You replay conversations in your mind. You check your phone again and again. You wonder what you did wrong. You imagine worst-case scenarios. The silence becomes louder than any insult. And the irony is, the other person might simply be busy, distracted, or unaware. But your trigger doesn't wait for logic. It jumps straight to threat detection. You might find yourself overcompensating, sending follow-up messages, trying harder to be interesting, helpful, or agreeable. Or you may withdraw completely to protect your pride. Either way, your behavior shifts because something inside you equates being ignored with being insignificant. Once you become aware of this trigger, you can pause and separate reality from interpretation. Silence is not always rejection. And even if someone does ignore you intentionally, their action is not a measure of your worth. The second trigger lives in the subtle craving for validation. You may tell yourself you don't care what people think, but notice how your mood changes after praise or criticism. A single compliment can energize you. A single negative comment can overshadow 10 positive ones. Validation is powerful because it reinforces your sense of identity. When someone acknowledges your effort, talent, or character, your brain releases dopamine. It feels rewarding, it feels safe, it feels like belonging. But when validation becomes a trigger, you begin outsourcing your self-worth. You hesitate to express opinions that might be unpopular. You tailor your personality to fit the room. You measure your value by likes, comments, applause, or approval. The danger isn't in enjoying validation, it's in depending on it. When your emotional state is tied to external reactions, you give others control over your internal stability. This trigger often forms early in life. Perhaps praise was conditional. Perhaps love felt earned rather than given. So now, unconsciously, you chase reassurance. You may overwork, overgive, or overperform just to feel secure. The key is recognizing the difference between appreciation and necessity. Appreciation feels good but isn't required for your sense of self. Necessity feels urgent, anxious, and heavy. When you notice that urgency, that's your trigger speaking. The third emotional trigger you might not recognize is the comparison reflex. It activates instantly and automatically. You walk into a room and scan for where you stand. You scroll online and measure your life against curated highlights. You hear about someone's achievement and immediately evaluate your own progress. Comparison once served a survival purpose. It helped humans assess their status within the group. Higher status often meant better access to resources and protection. But in the modern world, constant exposure amplifies this instinct. The comparison trigger can create envy, insecurity, or even quiet resentment. It can also create superiority, which is just insecurity in disguise. You may downplay others' success to protect your ego, or you may diminish yourself in the presence of someone you perceive as more attractive, successful, or confident. What makes this trigger so powerful is that it distorts reality. You compare your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel. You compare your weaknesses to their strengths. And no one wins that game. The emotional spike you feel when comparing isn't about them, it's about your internal narrative. Awareness allows you to interrupt it. Instead of asking, "How do I measure up?" you can ask, "What can I learn?" Or "What do I truly want for myself?" Comparison only becomes toxic when it defines your worth rather than informs your growth. The fourth trigger operates through perceived criticism. Not actual criticism, but perceived criticism. Sometimes a neutral comment can feel like an attack. A simple suggestion sounds like disapproval. A different opinion feels like rejection. When this trigger is activated, your nervous system shifts into defense mode. You may become argumentative, sarcastic, withdrawn, or overly apologetic. The intensity of your reaction often reveals that it's not about the present moment alone. It's layered with past experiences. Perhaps you grew up in an environment where mistakes were harshly judged. Perhaps approval was inconsistent. So now, even constructive feedback feels threatening. Your brain tries to protect you from shame. The problem is, when you interpret everything as criticism, growth becomes difficult. You might avoid feedback entirely. Or you might obsess over small comments for days. The emotional charge isn't about the words themselves, it's about what those words represent to you: failure, inadequacy, not being enough. Once you recognize this trigger, you can create space between stimulus and response. You can ask yourself, is this truly an attack, or is it information? Not every suggestion diminishes your value. Sometimes it simply refines your direction. The fifth emotional trigger is the need for control. This one hides behind productivity, planning, and perfectionism. On the surface, it looks responsible, organized, driven, but underneath, it's often fear. Life is unpredictable. People are unpredictable. Outcomes are unpredictable. And uncertainty can feel deeply unsafe. So you attempt to control variables. You plan every detail. You rehearse conversations. You anticipate problems before they happen. When things deviate from your expectations, frustration or anxiety spikes. That emotional surge is the trigger. It's the discomfort of unpredictability. The need for control often develops in environments where chaos was common. Controlling what you could became a coping mechanism. It gave you a sense of stability. But in adulthood, excessive control can strain relationships and exhaust your energy. You may struggle to delegate, you may micromanage, you may feel restless when plans change. The deeper issue isn't the change itself, it's the loss of certainty. Recognizing this trigger means learning to tolerate uncertainty without interpreting it as danger. Control is comforting, but flexibility is freeing. The sixth trigger revolves around abandonment sensitivity. Even in stable relationships, a small shift in tone or routine can create anxiety. A shorter message, a canceled plan, a delayed call. Suddenly, your mind starts constructing stories. They're losing interest. They're pulling away. You're about to be replaced. This trigger is powerful because attachment runs deep. Humans are wired for connection. When attachment feels threatened, your body reacts before logic intervenes. You may become clingy, seeking reassurance. Or you may detach first to avoid being hurt. You might test the other person without realizing it, looking for proof that they care. The intensity of this reaction often reflects earlier experiences of inconsistency or loss. The trigger isn't about the present person alone. It's about unresolved fear resurfacing. Awareness allows you to slow down the narrative. Instead of assuming abandonment, you can gather evidence. You can communicate openly rather than react defensively. Emotional maturity doesn't eliminate the trigger, but it reduces its control over your behavior. The seventh emotional trigger is identity threat. This one is subtle, yet profound. You hold certain beliefs about who you are: independent, kind, intelligent, strong. When someone challenges that identity, even unintentionally, you feel destabilized. If you see yourself as generous and someone calls you selfish, the reaction is sharp. If you see yourself as competent and someone questions your ability, it stings deeply. Your identity is your psychological anchor. When it feels threatened, you instinctively defend it. You may argue passionately, you may dismiss the other person entirely. You may over-explain yourself to restore your self-image. The emotional intensity isn't about being right, it's about preserving coherence. Humans need a stable sense of self. When that stability wavers, discomfort follows. But identity isn't meant to be rigid. Growth often requires updating your self-concept. Perhaps you are generous most of the time but acted selfishly in one moment. That doesn't destroy your identity. It expands. It's a more flexible your self-concept, the less reactive you become when it's challenged. What makes these triggers powerful is that they operate quickly. The brain processes emotional stimuli faster than rational thought. By the time you're consciously aware, your body has already reacted. Heart rate shifts, muscles tense, thoughts accelerate. You justify your reaction afterward, believing it was logical. But logic often arrives late to the party. The key to mastering emotional triggers isn't eliminating them, it's recognizing them early. Awareness creates a pause, and in that pause, you reclaim choice. Think about the last time you felt disproportionately upset. Was it truly about the situation, or was a trigger activated? Maybe you felt ignored. Maybe your identity felt threatened. Maybe comparison stole your confidence. When you start identifying patterns, you begin seeing that certain themes repeat. Different faces, same emotional script. That script was written long ago, often before you had the tools to question it. Emotional triggers aren't weaknesses, they're signals. They point toward unresolved fears, unmet needs, and protective strategies. They show you where healing is required. If being ignored devastates you, perhaps you crave acknowledgement. If criticism overwhelms you, perhaps you fear inadequacy. If comparison consumes you, perhaps you're uncertain about your own path. Each trigger contains information about what matters to you. There's also a paradox. The more you resist your triggers, the stronger they become. Suppressing emotion doesn't dissolve it, it buries it. And buried emotions tend to resurface, amplified. Instead of shaming yourself for reacting, approach your triggers with curiosity. Ask yourself what they're protecting. What are they trying to prevent? Often the answer is pain, embarrassment, rejection, loss. Your brain prefers overreacting to underreacting when safety feels uncertain. Developing emotional awareness requires slowing down. Most reactions happen in milliseconds. To interrupt them, you need to build the habit of reflection. When you feel a surge of emotion, label it. Name it precisely. Not just anger, but embarrassment. Not just sadness, but disappointment. Specific labeling reduces intensity because it engages rational processing. Then trace it backward. What story did your mind create? What assumption did you make? What fear was activated? Over time, you may notice that certain environments amplify specific triggers. Social media intensifies comparison. Hypersure workplaces amplify fear of criticism. Romantic relationships amplify abandonment, sensitivity. Understanding context helps you prepare. Preparation doesn't mean avoidance. It means entering situations with awareness of your patterns. Another powerful step is separating past from present. Many triggers are echoes. Your nervous system reacts to a current stimulus as if it's an old wound reopening. Remind yourself gently, this is now, not then. The person in front of you is not the person from your past. The situation may resemble an old memory, but it is not identical. This distinction weakens automatic responses. It's also important to communicate about triggers in close relationships. Vulnerability reduces misunderstanding. Saying, when I don't hear back, I sometimes overthink, invites connection rather than conflict. Without communication, triggers create stories, and stories create distance. Openness transforms triggers from secret weapons into shared understanding. Self-compassion plays a crucial role in managing emotional triggers. Harsh self-judgment compounds the reaction. If you criticize yourself for being sensitive, you add shame to the original emotion. Compassion, on the other hand, calms the nervous system. It reminds you that being triggered is part of being human. You are not broken. You are wired for survival. As you grow more aware, you'll notice something surprising. The intensity of triggers begins to decrease. Not because life becomes easier, but because you stop interpreting every emotional spike as truth. Emotions are messengers, not dictators. They deliver information, but you decide what to do with it. Imagine navigating a disagreement without feeling personally attacked. Imagine seeing someone else succeed without doubting your own path. Imagine receiving feedback without spiraling into self-doubt. Imagine tolerating silence without assuming rejection. These shifts are possible when awareness replaces automatic. Emotional intelligence isn't about being calm all the time. It's about understanding the architecture of your reactions. It's about recognizing that beneath anger might be fear. Beneath jealousy might be insecurity. Beneath defensiveness might be shame. When you address the root rather than the surface, transformation begins. Your triggers will never disappear entirely. You're human, but they can become teachers instead of tyrants. Each time one activates, you're offered a choice. React unconsciously, repeating old patterns, or pause, reflect, and respond intentionally. That pause is where growth lives. And here's the empowering truth. The same wiring that makes you reactive also makes you deeply capable of connection, ambition, love, and resilience. The fear of being ignored exists because belonging matters to you. The sensitivity to criticism exists because growth matters to you. The comparison instinct exists because achievement matters to you. Your triggers reveal your values, even when they cause discomfort. The journey isn't about becoming untriggered, it's about becoming aware. Because once you see the strings, you can decide which ones you're willing to let pull you. Emotional freedom doesn't mean feeling less, it means understanding more. And when you understand your hidden triggers, you stop being controlled by invisible forces and start consciously shaping your reactions. So the next time your heart races, your mood shifts, or your thoughts spiral, don't immediately judge yourself. Pause. Ask which trigger might be activated. Ask what it's protecting. Ask whether the current situation truly warrants the intensity of your reaction. That simple inquiry can change the trajectory of conversations, relationships, and even your self-concept. You are not just your reactions. You are the awareness behind them. And awareness is power.